very distinguished gathering. I've already been told that we are running a bit late, and so I have more material than I can cover in the time allotted to me. So I'm going to just say that the first part of my presentation was going to be to set the stage, the context in which affirmative action in India operates. So after this first slide, I'm actually going to skip that context by summarizing it in just a few sentences and then move over directly to some discussion of the affirmative action program in India. So basically, the affirmative action program in India is caste-based. And while the caste system and the problems of caste discrimination are extremely complex, if I were to summarize the problem in one slide, basically what it is that the ex-untouchable jatis, who are also called Dalits, are subjected to deprivation, discrimination, oppression, violence, exclusion, and a stigmatized ethnic identity. The caste system, which in Hindi is also called the jati system, consists of about 6,000 jatis, and there is no exact count of the number of jatis that exist. And so there is actually no data by individual jati. And so the data that we have on the caste system is defined by the needs of the affirmative action policy, which reserves 22.5% seats in government-run education institutions and government jobs, and electoral constituencies at all levels of government. So basically, there are 4 official categories. One is the scheduled castes. These are the Dalits. These are roughly about 16% of the population nationally, although their shares in state populations vary quite a bit. Then India also has a large tribal population, and these are called scheduled tribes. That's because their names appear in a government schedule. Again, nationally they are about 7.5%. But again, by state, their population varies a lot. Then there is now a third category called other backward castes, or OBCs. I'll talk about this a little bit later. And these are groups that are still not counted by the national census. So we don't really know what the proportion of OBCs in the Indian population is. But we have sample surveys that roughly estimate their proportion to be roughly about 40% and 43% in rural areas and about 34% in urban areas. And all others that are not classified as scheduled caste, tribes, or OBCs is clubbed in a residual omnibus category called others. So as you can see, others is actually not an actual category. It's just anyone who's not an SC, ST, or an OBC. So this is really the stage on which the affirmative action program is defined. And I was going to talk about labor market discrimination against Dalits and how actually discrimination manifests itself in the urban formal sector labor market, which is not supposed to be hiring on the basis of social identity. But I am actually going to skip that part, and we can come back to it in the Q&A this time. I'll just highlight this one slide, which is a part of a study that I conducted, which was a college to work study, where we asked Dalit students about about how they felt about the quota policy, which is the affirmative action policy. So we find that Dalits actually end up being great supporters of the reservation policy, as it's called in India, because they are convinced that without the quotas or without the reservations, they would not have been able to study in the degree that they were studying, and they would not have been able to get access to a university education, which they had as a result of the quota policy. And so for the first time, for several of them, it's for the first time in their lives that they are able to be a part of society that none of their forefathers had been able to experience before. And so the silence that's been imposed through generations in their families, they feel it's broken by the affirmative action policy. And this is true even for second or third generation beneficiaries of affirmative action. And because the affirmative action policy is applicable only to the public sector, there is a fear that as the Indian economy privatizes, this will lead to a dilution of the affirmative action program. again, I'll skip this slide. This is about how people find out what caste you belong to, because it's not scripted in the same sense as races. And I'll just highlight the last bullet of this particular slide. So we were interviewing Dalit students as well as upper caste students. And on every single count, we found that upper caste students had more superior attributes as compared to Dalit students. So we asked them, did they feel that they were privileged as a result of these attributes? And uniformly, all our upper caste students responded that they did not see themselves as privileged because of these qualities. So then we asked them, who in India is actually privileged? They said it's the Dalits, because they have the affirmative action policy in their favor, and we have to actually face market competition, whereas they have everything cut out for them. So it's completely reversing cause and effect in the minds of the upper caste students. So basically what we find in the private sector, which is where the quota policy or the reservation policy does not apply, that all hiring managers, including multinational corporations, including foreign firms, they use the language of merit. So they believe that they're hiring the best person for the job, except that managers are completely blind to the unequal playing field which produces this merit. And interestingly, their commitment to merit is voiced alongside convictions that merit is distributed by caste and by region. So what happens in the labor market in the private sector is that the qualities of individuals are replaced by stereotypes that at best will make it harder for a highly qualified job applicant to gain recognition for his or her skills and accomplishments. So, and if you look at the business houses, then we have what I call hereditary reservations, which is if you're the son of the owner of the company, then you're highly likely to be employed in the company as the CEO or as the managing director. So basically, what we find in the private sector in India is that the role of networks, informal and personalized recruitment, is very important, and who you know is often more important than what you know. So that's, so it's basically what it's trying to say is that merit is perhaps might not be the only explanation for why people are hired in the kinds of jobs that they are hired. So when we ask employers about why they do this, they find that it's convenient and efficient, it minimizes recruitment costs, it ensures commitment and loyalty, it minimizes transaction costs of disciplining workers and handling disputes and grievances. So there is in fact a lot of caste-based or region-based and sometimes kinship-based recruitment even in the formal private sector in the Indian economy. So to sum up this whole background, what we find is that the social and cultural capital, which is the complex and overlapping categories of caste, family background, network and contacts, play a huge role in the labor market. Hiring is often not transparent in the private sector. Several of the jobs are not advertised at all. So we don't know how people find out about those jobs and how they get into those jobs. I mean, we know actually because it's through networks. But, and so effective affirmative action can actually turn things around, except that any discussion of strengthening or restructuring of the affirmative action program is a highly sensitive and politically charged issue, as I suspect it is in the United States as well. So this is just a description of the affirmative action program, which I already discussed. So if you come to the debate around the affirmative action program in India, the Indian debate strongly resonates the international debate, and the central charge made against the affirmative action program in India that it conflicts with the consideration of merit, that you are basically letting in people who are not qualified to do the job or are qualified to engage in the course of study that they are being admitted to. The argument is also made that it promotes casteism. So the assumption, of course, is that in the absence of affirmative action, there is no casteism in the Indian society, which in fact evidence doesn't suggest to be the case. There's also another charge that it benefits, and this is a very typically Indian expression, which is that it benefits the creamy layer, which is that within the beneficiary group is the already advantaged that get further advantage of the affirmative action program. So it's not really reaching the completely disprivileged within the beneficiary group. And so the argument goes that it's a regressive policy because it displaces more deserving candidates from the non-beneficiary groups in favor of the less deserving candidates from the beneficiary groups. So these are some of the charges against affirmative action program, which I suspect are very, very similar in the United States as well. But what is interesting in the Indian context is that perhaps like the unlike the United States, these are very heated debates without much empirical backing. Specifically for employment, for example, it's been argued that the quotas in the public sector are responsible for impairing efficiency and the quality of public services.